Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Welcome everybody to another episode of Teachers Talkin'. I am Dustin and I am here with Ghazali, my co-host, as I always am. We are absolutely thrilled to be diving into a really exciting topic today with a very special guest. So please welcome Conni Rasmussen. She is a marine biologist, a seasoned educator, a passionate advocate for outdoor education. Conni has an impressive background in both the classroom and the wild, from teaching in the USA and Europe to founding Simple Teen Life, an organization that's dedicated to helping teens reconnect with nature. And that's why this episode is titled Beyond the Classroom Walls: How Outdoor Learning Engages and Empowers Students. And we're going to discuss the unique benefits of outdoor education and how educators can incorporate outdoor learning into their curriculum for deeper engagement. So, Conni, before we dive in, could you just tell us a little bit more about your background, your experience with outdoor education, and really what inspired you to make nature such an integral part of teaching?
Well, yes, I'll make it short, but I could go on forever. But I was raised to where we were, like people say, you were raised by wolves, Conni. You're always outside. You know, I just love being outside. It's just my nature. No pun intended. So I went to college I wanted to do something outside. I really didn't know what it was. So I became a marine biologist / field biologist, depending on where the job took me. And I did things like I worked for the National Park Everglades and National Audubon and Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. What a great name. It was thousands of acres of virgin cypress swamp. And we literally lived in the swamp. And my mother came to visit. I was just out of college and she just shook her head. She's like, why? And we did alligator counts. We did bird counts. We would go out at night and you'd have to slide out of the boat and you had all the duct tape around you so that the leeches couldn't get you. And this is in Florida, down in the Everglades, and you would shine your light and you could see the eyes of the alligators. And this is how we, did some of the counts and some of the groves that the planes couldn't see and things like that. So I've always been, a huge advocate, and I just feel so comfortable in nature. Well, long story short, somewhere in there, I fell in love with a Navy man, and teaching just kind of became a pathway. And I always did outdoor education things anyway, so I became a teacher. No training whatsoever. And I thought, how hard can it be, right? It was the hardest year of my life. I finished it out. I said, I'll start what I finished. And whatever the last day of school was, I was like, I resigned. I would rather dig a ditch. I cannot do this. I had absolutely no training. So I went back to being seasonal outdoor educator for the state parks in Florida in the winter and Virginia in the summer. And I just thought, okay. Someone said, hey, there's a really great school they're so good, Conni. I think you'd be so good at this. You want to try it? And I'm like, well, all right, I'll try it. And that's where I fell in love. It was the right school. It was the right fit. And this is where I learned, where they saw that I had some thoughts outside the box, truly. And they embraced it. And so I was there for 7 years, which is the longest I had stayed anywhere. And they taught, they gave me the professional learning that teachers so often don't get. Even though you have your degree and you're trained, you still are like, new things come down the pipe and they don't train you. So they gave me all the training I needed. They gave me, the parents were very supportive. They were always open to new ideas. And we started a lot of outdoor things. And it was a very wealthy school. And it was very college preparatory for like Oxford, Yale, Cambridge. This is the first grade. These kids were tunneled into this. This was the thought process. They wanted the best education possible. And so I used to take them with me and my colleague. We would take them camping, something, they just didn't do much of, not too far from us at a state park. And we told them one night, these are high schoolers. We told them one night, we said, whatever you do, do not go outside. We're on a cape. There's wild animals out there. It's pitch black like you've never seen. And a bunch of high schoolers were thinking, oh yeah, they're going to try and sneak out. This is going to be bad, So, but what we did is, it was an old hunting lodge, and it was right on the bay. We had all gone to bed, and the teachers, we were upstairs, and then we had the guys in one half and the girls in the other. And it got really quiet. And I thought, oh no, they're not. And then we heard someone just scream like bloody murder. So we raced down there, and we intentionally didn't close like the barn doors. We left the glass doors open, and there were wild horses out there. And so a wild horse was just like staring in the pitch dark, and they just were terrified. And we laughed so hard. We knew what they were. We're like, you better get in the back end of the lodge. You can't, we told you, do not sneak out, and we knew from then on, we would have no problem with these kids ever going outside at night. They loved it during the day. But so there's so much there's so much going on in that regard. So after that, I taught for a while, and then I moved overseas and taught in a Swiss boarding school. My husband came with me, and we really liked that. We were dorm parents we didn't have children at the time, of all these international kids from all walks of life. And we did a lot of things outside. We did, it was part of the curriculum, really. Like, we went sailing in Sardinia. We'd take a group there. We did one of the things, this is where it really came to life. We would go to Italy and take a group to the vineyards. And this is where, and we would stay with the vineyard homes, and we would do studies on chemistry with the winemakers, and so to put that, your hands, oh my gosh, you can't get any better than that, wine. And then of course we got to taste the wine, the fruits of your labor. Again, no pun intended. There were we took them to Prague. I mean, we went all over when we were in Switzerland, and it was all outside based. We had the traditional classroom, but we also had the outside base. And then from there, I liked the international field so much. I, on a whim, applied to Oxford. I got in, and so that program was international science and statistical research methods. And I thought, I'll leave teaching for a while. I'm going to be a researcher. So I did, and I hated it. I was so bored. It was so boring after being, all the things that, the activity and being with the kids. I'm like, well, okay, this is not working. So then I tried admin, and I was a principal and assistant principal in an IB school in Switzerland. Again, this time we'd had kids at this point. We took our kids with us, and a couple other schools back in America, admin. It just didn't fit. And so one day I had to sit and think, after about 15 years of bouncing back and forth, what do I want to do when I grow up? I can't count alligators I'm a mom now, And so I was happiest in the classroom, just hands down. That's where I was happy. And so I went back, and I've been there ever since. And I went back into the public school system and helped open a charter school. There were 6 of us who were we were in an 8th grade team, and they asked us to help open the charter school. And so we did, and it was just a wonderful fit. And I recently just left there for the first time. I stepped out of the classroom again. So I was at the charter school for 10 years. And so I've taught pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic. And at the end of the day, my heart is in the classroom with teenagers. Even my job now that I work with teachers from science instruction, and I also work some of the admin with attendance issues and things to get kids back into school. And I do like it, but nothing will ever replace that classroom, inside or out. So I've had a grand journey, and it's not over yet. I'll probably end up in a classroom again.
Wow, that's a really awesome life you've had. You've been doing so much teaching, and you've been moving around, and you've been doing inside classroom teaching, outside classroom teaching. So I want to know more about what have you noticed about the benefits of outdoors education versus the indoor type of education that we have most of the time right now. What do you see as the benefits, the uniqueness, and basically the advantage of getting our kids outdoors and learning outside rather than being cooped up in the classroom.
Right. And I think part of my mission to get kids outside was because I personally needed to be outside. Those four walls were closing in fast, and then we have got to get out of here. One of the biggest things I feel like, in the traditional classroom, you've got your four walls. In a public school, we could have we're up to 35 kids in that classroom. And I'm mainly high school and secondary is what I work in. And you can just see the clouds, come over their eyes. It's like, oh my gosh, the walls are the same. There's no stimulation. I don't care what you're doing. You take them outside and their senses are like just boom, immediately heightened, without them even knowing it. There's you can see they're starting to observe what's around them, because in the classroom, what's around you. It's 4 cinder block walls and some bulletin boards, and you're tightly packed like sardines as kids to begin with. They all of a sudden they have the space. It's like they can breathe again, truly. And it's when we go outside, sometimes we would take the Chromebooks, not the cell phones. It was not an option. You take your Chromebooks out if we were actually doing a lab, if you needed the lab equipment, the probes or whatever. But when you took that cell phone away, it was a forced face-to-face conversation. And if you didn't feel like talking, you had enough space to not be awkward and kind of back away from the crowd. So you could see their stress levels socially just go down because they had that open space. There's something about that spatial piece. Kids who are, sometimes anxious in the classroom because, maybe the day before Johnny broke up with Betty, that sort of thing. But you give them a little space and they've forgotten about that, and you start the activities outside. I would do a thing called a brain break, where the adage is you take a child's age, say they're 15, and you add 5 minutes to that. So I have 20 minutes of their true attention before their brain starts to wander or shut down. Who knows what they're doing at 15,
Yep.
But it's not with
Yeah.
school at that point. So you have to break it up, and so sometimes when we were doing something inside that's where we had to be for the day, I made sure we had these brain breaks, and those brain breaks had to be outside, and I had exterior doors they could go out. No cell phones, no nothing. And they would actually go out there for 10 minutes. Some would take their book and sit under a tree and start to read. Some would sit over and just start to chit chat with each other. And those who had all kinds of energy would actually find sticks and have sword fights like they were 10 again. And others would find logs, almost logs, and the pine cones and start a game of baseball. It was just like a free-for-all. For those 10 minutes, you could just see like the breath was given back to them and the space that they needed, and their brain needed to recalculate, because to have them sit for 90-minute blocks is what we have traditionally in a lot of schools here is unreal. It's unrealistic. I can't do it. I just can't do it. So I know a 15-year-old is busting at the seams to do it. So it really does reduce their stress level. It does increase their memory, because so much they remember what they saw. If you ask a kid, do you remember what I said yesterday in that lecture? No. But you said, you remember the other day when you hit that pine cone that ricocheted off the oak tree that, and now we're going to do dichotomous keys, because now we're going to go find the trees. So the benefit is tremendous socially, mental health wise, physically. And it's free. Mother Nature is free. You take them out there. I don't need to ask the admin, can I have a grant for, $50,000 to do? No, it's right outside the door.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's free. And it looks like you really made full use of it. I mean, you spend your time outdoors with your students and they enjoyed it. So I can't imagine, how did you survive the COVID period? When people had to stay indoors, you can't go out, everybody's wearing the mask. How do you cope?
The COVID period, as a teacher, like everyone else in the world, they handled it differently. But here in Virginia, we were Zoom, like the bulk of the world, teaching that way. And so the best way to do that is that I found, because again, it was painful from a teacher's perspective too, for all those reasons. I'm like, what am I going to do? They still had to be taught, and they were still going to go through these horrible standardized testing, but anyway. So I would give them assignments. We would all be on there, and I would say, okay, your assignment is we're going to make a video. and we're going to mash it together. So go outside and find your favorite tree or your favorite flower. Make them go outside and get 3 or 4 of the favorite things from outside, like we were doing just biomes and environments. And some lived in very small apartments, and some lived in, they had big backyards and that sort of thing. But the point was, either, and if you couldn't go outside, you raised the window and you put your camera out the window and you find something. And then they would go into breakout rooms. And so then whatever the instructions were, it was something they brought in from the outside to do in Zoom breakout rooms to come up with something. So it was very difficult, but not impossible. And I think that might have been, to some degree, their saving grace too, because they knew I was not just going to sit and talk, or we were going to do something or watch a video, because personally it's just not how I can't function that way. I would die inside. Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you've had such grand opportunity of being able to do these things and take kids outside to experience things that they've never experienced before. When I was teaching in Los Angeles, I was like, in the concrete jungle, and I teach English language arts. And so I had none of my students had ever really experienced any real levels of nature, right? Like they've never been outside of the city. I didn't really have the means of taking them anywhere, but one of my favorite things that we had done at one point was we brought nature into the classroom. And so before we read like Walden and some other, American Romantic pieces, I had the students group up and my classroom became nature. The kids built a section of a forest. Other kids built the stars and the moon and and space. Other kids built mountains and rivers and lakes. And they used like everything and anything from bringing in rocks and sticks and leaves to, just making paper mache and things like that. And it helped us, at least to change those 4 walls and try to connect in a way that we didn't have any other way of connecting. Like there was nowhere really for us to go to experience, anything. But that makes me just really wonder about, for teachers who may not have experience with outdoor education, what are or are in places like that where there's not a lot to be able to truly experience. What would you say are some accessible ways of being able to incorporate more outdoor activity into their teaching?
Well, I think you raise a really good point, Dustin. You bring nature in to the classroom. I think that's it's another part of teaching, that you go outside, as far as your lesson plans. It does take you outside too. So I feel like as a teacher, it's something you really you need to do and you want to do. And not all teachers are comfortable with that, but there are other teachers, if you have a group, you can do this. Like here at the beach, I live in Virginia Beach, and we have a big season of horseshoe crabs. And most of the kids that I teach in the charter school, the beach is, not their thing. Some of them live kind of far from the beach on top of that. So I would always go out in the full moon in the fall, and there'd be hundreds of horseshoe crabs washed up, dead. They went out and they had laid their eggs, and so they will wash up. And so I'll go and get them, and then I'll bring them into the classroom. And most kids have never, ever seen it. And so when I bring those in, it's just like, they all remember. I mean, kids that I've taught, 15 years ago, they'll text me and say, they'll send me pictures. I saw these horseshoe crabs. I saw these horseshoe crabs. And we did all sorts of things with them. And we let them dry out. And then you could actually even turn them into art, because there's nothing else you can really do with them at that point. And we go into, just from that one horseshoe crab, we went into the medical field where they actually draw their blood. We talked about that, and population and overfishing of horseshoe crabs now, because their blue blood actually holds certain enzymes that, because they're an evolutionary wonder, because they never found one that was truly ill. They have something that fights off bacteria. As soon as they're cut, or whatever the case might be, this bacteria will fight it. And so now, for medical reasons, they're overfishing. And so just from that one horseshoe crab, that's all it took, almost an entire unit on overfishing and population issues around here and human impact. It turned in for so it doesn't take a lot. If you can find something that the kids would not naturally seek out, and it doesn't have to be, a horseshoe crab is a very odd creature, so it's kind of cool. But feathers on the ground, you go outside, feathers, all the leaves are falling. Like you said, there's so many ways just to go get a little and bring it into the classroom. If you have any sort of green space around the building, the school itself. You can have like mini field trips right out there, in the green space. But the problem, well, I guess the sadness of all of that is we have a huge green space where I teach, and we wrote a grant. And my friend Jamie Heiser, if you're still, she's moved to Montana, but we wrote a grant for $25,000 to start a community garden, because it's kind of more of like a food desert in certain areas where we were. And so we won. And so we had, we got the football team involved. We got the soccer team involved. The ROTC did their community service. It was just massive. So it's become, that one community garden has become where the art classes come out. The foreign languages come out and they do things in, the foreign language. The culinary arts use the herbs. It's all it took was a garden. Now we won a grant, obviously, so it was a big garden, but we had a smaller one before that. And the IB program went skyrocketed, and we would have feasts off of what we planted, organic versus, or all sorts of gardens like that. But the green space is a great thing. But then after the pandemic, what happened here, I used to be able just to open my exterior doors and we could go out, just in the green space, nothing special, but we had trees there. And then I was told after the pandemic, and then after the unfortunate, we do have a problem with school shootings. It's just, it's the reality that the doors had to be shut. And so I couldn't prop it open and feel the fresh air. I couldn't just, bust out the back doors and say, okay, we're going to go out here for 30 minutes or 10 minutes. It became a lengthy process, and for all the right reasons, it was all for right reasons. So that might be a barrier at some schools. It just depends on the location and that sort of thing. So you have to find your way around that as well. But it can be done, and you don't need a huge space. You don't need to go sailing in Sardinia. You don't need to go. We would go camping at local state parks, which weren't far. And some of the parents would volunteer to go because they'd never been camping, and so it was a weekend thing. And so there's so many ways to do it. But I think if you're truly limited as a teacher as to what's around you, I think, Dustin, what you do is perfect. You bring the nature into the classroom. Now, I know, and Dolly, you're thinking, well, we could use AI, because I know. Because you can.
Not
you
for
can
this.
bring it,
No.
You can use AI as well you can supplement a lot of things with AI. And I'm all about that. I'm not totally, if it's not, tangibly real, we can't do it. No, I think those two can coexist very, very well. Like when we do things like on, for AI, the kids will do an interview with, let's say John Muir or Jacques Cousteau, some of the latest, the previous environmentalists. And so as we learn about it from the outdoors, we can come in and AI, they can interview these guys on AI. It's amazing. So there is definitely a connection there without a doubt. And so for teachers who don't have access to a lot of nature, take what you have. And I'm all about bringing in the AI to that.
I would bring the AI out to nature, do
True.
your AI stuff outside. Yeah.
That's
so
true too.
that's the way to do it. Yeah. So to break this walled boundary area.
Yes.
I think you've raised so many ways of doing it, and you are very inspirational, and a lot of teachers may now want to do what you do. But I think one barrier perhaps in bringing students outside is this fear of the unknown. Like anything can happen. What if they get bitten by snakes? What if they get bitten by scorpions or what? All these issues, that could possibly happen, and then really mess up your plans. So I think it would be very useful if you could give some tips regarding safety, planning, and making the most of the outdoors environments for learning, which you already have, but more of the safety and planning, and what happens if something unexpected happens, or could you give us a nice story of something that you didn't plan for that could have gone bad, but you fixed it somehow? Yeah, I think the teachers would love to know that.
One of the places we use here a lot is called Falls Cape State Park. It's about 20 minutes to an hour from most of the schools in this area. Totally wild. And I'd worked there for a little bit, so I know it quite well. And we would always have a guide with us from the state park. So number one is, if you're going to go off the grounds like that, it's really good if you are in an organized arena like a state park or something to that nature, so that you do have a guide from the park who has, you know, the means of transportation if you know something happens, and the even the medical kit. You know, I'm not a doctor, and that's the first thing I'll tell the parents and everything when we're going somewhere. You know, I can't save you. I can't, but I can guide you. But these are the possibilities. But if a teacher is unfamiliar or uncomfortable in the setting, but still wants to do it, my biggest suggestion is make sure it's done alongside someone who is very, very well trained and apt for emergencies. But the other thing is, you don't want to take them out in places where, you know, there probably would be scorpions, but Falls Cave, there are snakes. But what the kids learn in this, okay, I do have a good story about the snakes. So we were in Falls Cave, and I always did make sure a ranger came with us, or one of their guides or someone for that, you know, just because they know the land in that regard. And there'd always been this one area where snakes for years always would hang out because everything was just right. And so I told her, I said, I want to take the kids to that. And she's like, all right, we'll make sure we're there. And I told the kids beforehand, and we learned about snakes. We taught about snakes, that they weren't venomous, but there were venomous ones in there. Not to say we're not going to Disney World, you know. So we get there, and I had 2 or 3 kids who were just terrified of snakes, just absolutely terrified of snakes. And so I talked about it with them, and I said, you stay with me, stay behind me if you need to. And those of you who want to go up there, you know, so we told all the rules and everything. And so they went and they saw it. And then one of the boys said, can I pick it up? And it was a black rat snake. And I said, well, it might bite you. And the guide said, yeah, it might bite you. But so then the guide picks it up. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then she hands it out to anybody who wants to pet it, you know, so they stroked it and they could feel it. So we never really put it in that child's hand for obvious reasons, but the kids were still allowed to do that. And now see, as a teacher, I couldn't do that, because if that child had gotten bit, I am totally liable for that, you know. So you have to be aware of those things. And the girls who were afraid saw their peers stroke the snake. And before it was over with, those 3 girls who were terrified actually they touched it. They didn't stroke it, but they're like, oh, I touched the snake, you know. And so that they saw their peers do it. It's a risk-taking factor. When you go outside, you become a risk taker, some bigger than others, but you do. Your observation skills they're heightened, you know. They're not in the classroom. We're walking, and these 3 girls are looking everywhere for snakes. So they didn't take their eyes off the ground, because they thought, which is good, because again, they knew what they were looking for, but they knew a background about it, and they saw the snakes, and in the end they touched it and nothing happened. No harm came to them, and they had something to talk about. I mean, oh my gosh, that was the talk for weeks in class, and all the kids in the school knew I touched the snake. So and I lived to tell about it, you know. That was the greatest thing. And it boosts their self-esteem, it boosts their confidence. It made all the kids clap for them when we got out away from the snakes, because they said, don't make any loud noises around the snakes. So they cheered them on for the rest of the day. It was like, you know, the athlete who just made the touchdown who gets all the cheers, but these 3 girls who touched the snake had more cheers than any touchdown in any football game. So there's just so much to be said for that, you know. So my advice to anyone, any teacher who's going to take kids outside, that's not just outside, you know, if you're going out in the schoolyard, you know, it's probably just birds and bees and things like that. Don't go without a guide of some sort that is much more knowledgeable than you, for sure. And that's why we do state parks. There's a lot of, you know, small nonprofit organizations that will do things with school systems. Like we've got several out here around the water and things. So that is my absolute advice to anyone taking them out that's not comfortable. Find an organized, guided place.
I'm curious, what kind of activities do you do with the kids kind of like post something like that? Like once you go out and you do something at the state park and you come back into the school, how do you connect it back to, you know, what you learned out there, what you experienced out there, bring it back into the classroom?
Well, we bring this, there's a lot of ways you can do that. And there's a, there's a big push for socioeconomic, or not socioeconomic, social emotional learning in that regard. So you can tie this into it as well in terms of the mental health and the social aspect, like the girls with the snakes. And at that point, the reason why we took that field trip was because we were in the environmental section of different environments. We had the ocean there, a maritime forest, a wetland. So we had several of those. And so we broke it down. That one, they broke down into groups. So break down by the environment that you were at, or break down by the animals that you saw. So we kept bringing that back. And so we learned the environmental aspects of each one. We learned the human aspects or impact of each one. And then some of them would make, some did infographics, and some did poetry and things like that. Once we got the science into it, that these are the things, this is how it all worked. And then allow them to take the creative side to what they learned to bring it back to the actual topic. And I think that's, you give them some open space to do that as well. Instead of me saying, okay, we learned this, here's your multiple choice. It was like, oh my gosh, you kind of suck the fun out of it, really, and the joy out of what you just learned. And so, and then this way you can use, and there's a variety of things that you can use. There was a lot of math that was involved in some of these, and you can tie that into the math. There's history. False Cape is, that has a huge history of some older communities. So you can tie that in with the social studies and other aspects. And again, when you're outside like that, it's so far away from a textbook, which is so, restrictive as to this is what you learned. And so the creativity given back to the kids when you get back into the classroom, to let them pick what really struck them. Oh my gosh, I had no idea, or what I learned, or what I loved, or what I will remember. Some kids even wrote letters. I mean, they had to be handwritten, and they wrote letters to their grandparents to tell them how great and what they loved about it. And so, they didn't even know how to address an envelope, in all honesty. So there was another side lesson they wanted to share with their grandparents. I said, don't make it a little more personal. Do not send them a text. And so you can be as creative as you want. And I think that's what makes teaching fun, is because you're seeing it through their eyes when you bring it back. I already know what lessons I need to incorporate, because I have that standardized piece. But what did the kids want to incorporate into that lesson? That's what's going to make the difference.
I really love that, because you're just bringing in I've been thinking about it too the whole time, and you circled right to it, student choice within a lot of it, and making those personal connections to what they experienced. I absolutely love that kids chose to want to talk to their grandparents, that you then push them to write handwritten letters. Like, I think it's a lost art, but also something that's so important, because it's part of the things that help us be part of a community. I'm curious, I think you sort of touched on it, but I'm also just curious, how do you take experiences like this and make them cross-curricular? How do you work with teachers of other subject areas to sort of like bring this all full circle, or is that something that you've done?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think how this happens is sometimes like the garden, let's just keep it really simple instead of going, off to Prague or something, or even Falls Cape and camping in the schoolyard right there. I feel like a garden, once we had that garden, and just the small one, this is why we wrote the grant for the bigger, we had a small one out back, and we had where kids could come out, the art students, one day they saw it by happenstance because it was in the back of the building. And they went back to the art teacher. And so we started collaborating. So absolutely go back there, and they started the art, and their art turned into the labels in the garden, which was sent to the Votex kids, who laminated them and made them weatherproof. And so now we have these beautifully hand-drawn labels for the garden that simply, we just, gave that creativity piece to the students, gave them the materials to do it. And there you have it. And then from there, once it came out front, the big garden's out front, where the kids, they have to pass it every single day. Now everyone was seeing it. And they were like, the culinary teacher said, hey, can we have an herb garden? And we're like, well, yeah, sure. So we pulled the culinary in it, which came back into biology when we studied macromolecules. And we would go out in the garden and say, here, these are the macromolecules, and this is what you should be eating, which tied back into the culinary, which tied into what we did is we started to research local restaurants that were claimed to be organic. And so from that piece, they would write the restaurants, and they would explain what they were looking for, and to verify, was it organic or not, which came into the chemistry class when we would test the soils to see what chemicals, when we use the pesticides versus not. So it's just, it's unlimited. And I never met a teacher that wasn't interested in any of those areas. They never did I meet one that said, well, no, I've got to teach this or this. As soon as they realized, oh no, but you can teach it that way. But we're going to go outside and bring it in to the real world as well, like the menus. And a lot of those restaurants actually would send us gift cards to come and visit. We didn't know that was going to happen, but that was kind of nice. So I honestly, I thought the beauty of all of that is everybody won. The teachers won, the kids won. It was the parents loved it. A lot of times we'd involve the parents if they could be there. It's a win-win.
And you seem to be good at bringing all these people together, from the kids to the parents and all that. And can you tell our listeners the purpose for you founding this organization or movement? What do you call it? Simple Teen Life?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I get so involved about teaching. That's why I like the name of this, Teachers Talking. I mean, we could go on forever, right? It's just not, it's just never ending. You got to be with your own kind, right?
That's how we do. Yes, we just talk on and on.
Simple Teen Life started because at that time I was also a parent of 2 teen boys, and I was like, this is ridiculous. They're playing ice hockey, they're in scouts, they're in church. I mean, it was just nonstop. I'm like, my head is spinning, and I was teaching full time. And I felt like it was the same in my classroom. These kids would come back during the day. It was like, oh, I didn't do my homework because, and they would give me, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, we're done. And so I pulled back on my own boys first, because I was the parent and what I say goes, right? We're going to do this. And so I pulled back, you can only take one AP class. You're going to go to college, but it's got to be something you're interested in, find your interest here while you're in high school. But we need dinner at the table occasionally. We can't do this 5 days a week, so I just wanted to pull them back and let them have some downtime and be teenagers without having to come. They didn't get home till 6, and then they had homework, and then they had whatever practice or lessons. I'm like, this got to stop. And so one day I was talking about it with my freshmen, saying, I'm not going to give any homework this month. I'm just going to see what happens, because I feel like you guys, you don't have time to do it, number one, because a lot of the kids actually they were the older ones, and they were taking care of their siblings when they got home from school, or they had part-time jobs out of necessity, and homework was the last thing on their plate. I said, okay. And so we just started talking, and these 4 teens, they said, hey, why don't we start a business? I'm like, about what? And they're like, making our parents aware that it's too much. We need to slow down. And it started, I was like, I don't know anything about building a business, but I back you on this. And this is 100% an awesome idea. So we went with it. And before we knew it, it was an awareness campaign to slow teen life down. That became our slogan. And then a couple of the environmental groups, Lynnhaven River Now in particular, I have to give them a plug, who helped me, a lot within the school systems. They said, come to our vendor show. And I'm like, why? What am I going to do at a vendor show? And they're like, just spread awareness. I'm like, okay. So the kids created the logo, which was a horseshoe crab. Because they said a horseshoe crab's evolutionary and is strong and it's a survivor like a teenager. I'm like, that's beautiful. That's perfect. So they went ahead and the social media part, they just took care of all that and the slogan and stuff. So we took it out to Lynnhaven vendor show, and we had a lot of horseshoe crabs, dead ones, not live ones. And we had, they took milk jugs and turned them into bird feeders. And so, and so people gathered and like, what do you do? And we're like, well, we're just spreading awareness. And one thing led to another. And then it was like, what do you sell? And we're like, nothing, just awareness. So we got to, well, what can we do? And so from there it became Downtime in a Box. where the teenagers were actually creating these boxes full of a hobby that required no screen, no battery, pure old-fashioned downtime. And it took off, downtime in a box. And so we said, oh, let's try subscription boxes. And it took off. And we're like, wait a minute, I don't have time to do this. And neither did they. We're like, now we're going against our grain. We're so busy. We need to back up the bus, guys. What are we going to do now? And so then this is how we started things like a monthly hike. We do that now. So we lead a hike every month at our favorite state park, where it's kind of, centrally located to the beach and anyone else. And it's totally for free. And every penny that we've made, along with the subscription boxes and that thing, have all gone to, two organizations for teens in foster care to connect with the Wish and kids, Virginia Kids Belong, with the older teens who get ready to age out, and Virginia's not very good at taking care of them. Once you're 18, you're out. And so that's where every penny has gone, basically, the proceeds to these organizations. Because once we started to make money, we didn't know what to do with it. I mean, we weren't in it for the money. We were in it for the message. And so we said, well, we've got money. And they said, foster teens. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So they've done a lot with teens in foster care. So that's how it evolved. So we've been going now this is our 6th year. Yeah.
That's so cool. Where can people learn more about that, or, donate money, and where can people learn about it? You guys got a website? Or?
Yeah, we do. We have a website, and it's called Simple Teen Life. We're on Instagram, and there's one for the parents, which is called Simple Teen Life 1, just the number 1. And then there's the teens who run the other one, Simple Teen Life. And so yeah, it's that we're on Facebook. We're not heavy on social media, just because to me that's a little bit of the issue to begin with, of downtime, but enough to advertise and support the teens in foster care and the programs that way. Like, we're getting ready to launch our holiday box that'll be posted Friday. And the proceeds to that go to Teens for Foster Care, or Teens in Foster Care. And it will be, well, I can't tell you what it's going to be. It's always just a surprise. Sorry, if I told it, they'd be mad. I can't. And it's for any age, really. It used to be just for teens, and we said, why limit it? Let's break it out and make it for all ages, even up to college kids. They need a little downtime too as well. And there's 3 choices this year. We kind of broadened out a little bit. And so yeah, it happened. Again, it was just organically happened through conversations about what was happening in the life of a teen and a mom at the time who had the teens.
So awesome. And I love that the kids, it's so clear the kind of impact that you're having on your students when your kids say, we want to design something for more downtime, and then they bring the crab, the horseshoe crab back into it, just that it just goes to show what kind of an impact what you're doing with kids is having, because that just became such a natural thing. I just think that's so super cool. So just great work.
Thank you. It's not work, that's the thing. It's not work. It's a passion. Teachers' work is passion. Let's face it. It's not for the money.
It's true. Like, we do this because this is what we love to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we love to connect with people. We love to share experiences with people. We love to help others learn about themselves and the world around them. And, and I agree. Teachers have never gotten into it for the money. And though it would be nice to get more money, that's just not.
Yeah.
Teachers are people who are built a little bit differently in some respects. So, really cool. This has been an incredible conversation. Is there anything we haven't talked about, Conni, that you would love to, still share? Any other impacts about outdoor education that you think is important for our listeners to hear about?
I just think outdoor education is simple. It truly is. It's all, outdoor education is all about freedom and expansiveness, not just in the space, but in the ideas that the kids will come up with a little bit of expansiveness in space. And it just puts all, kids are just so full of energy. And when you take them outside, every sense that they have goes on alert. you know, sometimes high alert because it's a snake, or it's just like a decompression piece. It's like, oh, thank goodness I've got out of those four walls. I can get away from so-and-so and all the drama, you know, just give me 10 minutes to go hug a tree or whatever, whatever it might be, or go read my book. Just give me some solace here for a minute. And, you know, being sedentary, how, you know, the traditional schools are set up, how you just sit. Well, we as humans, no matter what age, we were never meant to be sedentary. Never. You end up, the kids, poor posture, bad circulation. Mentally, it's just, it's really not all that good for the child. We have a problem with obesity in this country, and you have kids sitting at a desk for 90 minutes. You know, you get them out and going and let them experience what that felt like. And, you know, maybe you can grow a little habit there with them the best way you can, even just in small increments. So there's just, and there's, you know, there's aches and pains, there's eye strains because the kids, you know, they're like this over their laptop all day, you know. So being sedentary, if I had any advice for any teacher, whether you can get them outside or not, at least get them out of these chairs, find ways for movement within that classroom, within those four walls. And if you can sneak out to the green space and get some time out there, it's the biggest impact, biggest bang for your buck, because it's free, that you could possibly give a child and yourself as a teacher, because teachers need breaks. You can't go for 90 minutes and not have a break, and have a break with the kids. You get to know the kids. They'll come and talk to you when, you know, and sometimes they'll tell you things you just wish they never told you, but they did. I really didn't even know that.
Yep.
That's a fact.
So, yeah. So this has been wonderful, guys. I'm so glad. Wait a minute, let me plug in. Hold on. My battery's dying here. Oh.
And maybe we lost her right here at the very end.
Yeah, maybe she didn't get enough time to plug in.
This was an awesome conversation. And in case she pops back in here, Ghazali, was there any final words that you had?
No, I mean, I'm truly inspired by what she's doing. I'm now thinking about how I can bring my students out of the classroom more often next semester. Yep. So I think there's a lot of thinking to be done, planning to be done, but ultimately it's going to be worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this whole conversation had me thinking the same, like, how can I incorporate more outdoor things into what I'm doing with kids? I'm lucky enough where I'm working with kids one-on-one, and everything is very flexible. So there are a lot of times that I take my students just like out for a walk, and we will discuss our stuff as we're walking around, and it's all I could think about throughout this whole conversation. So just a really wonderful opportunity. And there's Connie. She pops back
I'm
in.
sorry. I didn't realize my computer was unplugged.
It
I
happens.
the battery got packed in.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
we
guys.
go on and on, you know. So yeah, don't worry about it. We have captured so much learning from you, and especially we are inspired, and we want to bring our students out of the classroom more often next semester. So we're gonna spend a lot of time planning for it. Yeah, and I think it's definitely something that is worthwhile doing.
Thank you, guys. Oh, I did. There's one thing I forgot to tell you. I'm just do one more shameless plug, that I have a book coming out in 2025 called The Death of Downtime for teenagers. And it's based off of 10 years data that I collected. The school that I've been in, the charter school, it's, you know, there's obviously some missteps in there as far as hard data, but it's the same demographic, the same class, same age, everything, as to how downtime has changed since pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. Because I would start every year asking the kids, not for data, but just for my own sake, what do you like to do in your downtime? I'd ask them every year, and they'd write it down for me. And I did it because I wanted to make my lessons more apt. You know, this is what they like to do, so let's change it up. And then as I started to gather it, and then as time went by, I started to plug it in, and I saw this definitive, just spike, obviously, in technology. from the simple downtimes they wanted, like to hang out with their grandparents, cook dinner, go shoot hoops with their brother. And so it's a book for parents about ideas to bring downtime back because it's gone the wrong direction. So anyway, I just had to throw that in there, but it won't be ready probably until about June of 2025.
Okay, who's publishing it, or where can we get it? Is it on going to be on Amazon? How do we get a copy?
Well, it'll be on Amazon, and I'm still looking for the publisher. In all honesty, I'm still working on that. I've got about 6-7 more months to go on this before it's truly ready to go. So, but I'll keep you posted. Don't you worry.
I
Please
want a
do.
signed copy from you. Okay, a signed copy.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would feel honored.
Yeah, I'm
thank
very
you.
much looking forward to that. And we would love to have you back on for a second time. We can dive in and talk about the book once you are releasing. Because we would love to dive in and talk more about that for sure.
Absolutely.
We should.
I would love to. I've enjoyed this immensely. It's so nice to talk to teachers. I love it.
So what I look forward to every recording. So this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's not often that we get to talk about horseshoe crab and snakes and scorpions, you know.
Or horses, or wild horses scaring kids.
Yeah. True.
I love it. So Conni, thank you. Ghazali, as always, thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being with us and joining us on this journey. Remember to like and subscribe and review and share the podcast because we love to support teachers everywhere in all of the ways. And if you would like to be a guest on Teachers Talking, remember, you do not have to be an expert about anything. You just have to be a passionate educator like Conni is. You can get a link to sign up with us in the show notes. And just thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you.